Yeah, there it
There we
is.
go. All right. So
I
welcome
wonder.
everybody, and I'm excited that it's Mike and I today. So Mike, I'm going to let you kick us off.
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, everybody. I hope we have people. I always wonder, Dana, if we're just
Yeah.
talking to ourselves
Oh,
for the
yeah.
first 5 minutes while
Or
people
if
are
people are
joining, or if
coming in.
anybody's. So, if you're listening, if you joined right at 10 o'clock, like leave a comment. I'm curious how quickly people are joining. But we, as Dana mentioned, we're without H today,
Oh,
or possibly
yes.
he might surprise us and do a surprise join, but he's got a busy day today, so we might not see him. But today we're going to talk about lessons in leadership, which has been an ongoing topic that we've had for many weeks. But today we're going to focus on core values. And Dana's going to take us through an exercise that she does with a lot of her clients to dig into what are your core values, how do you associate your core values with your strengths, and then how do you show up in a way that's aligned with your core
Mhm.
values. So just to introduce myself, my name is Micah Lawrence. I am an ICF certified coach and a Gallup certified strengths coach. I do leadership coaching with a lot of startup founders and small business owners, and do team development workshops with their teams. So hey, Phil is there. We got a comment.
Yay.
All
All
right,
right.
Phil is punctual, right on time.
Yay. We love
Okay,
that.
thank you,
We
Phil, for
love that.
making a comment.
Yeah,
As we
Phil.
as we talk about this, Phil, and anybody else who's listening, as we talk about this topic, we'd love to see any questions or even comments that you have on the topic of values and leadership. And we will always make a point to point it out. And I think it's how people know we're actually live too, is that we can comment or make comments on
Mhm.
people's input. But we love hearing the input, and we'll definitely make space for it in our conversation. So I'll turn it over to Dana, let her introduce herself, and get into the exercise that we want to focus on today.
Thank you, Micah. Yes, I'm Dana Williams, and I started my own consulting company almost about 18 months ago. So, fairly new entrepreneur
Yeah.
like Micah. I'm coming from corporate. Um, we both are passionate about Clifton strengths and both Gallup certified coaches. I really focus on productivity and helping leaders really understand who they are from the inside out and then transform themselves and their teams. So we've been talking, gosh, I guess it's been at least 6 weeks about
Yeah.
transformation and the great reshuffling. And one of the things that we're hearing from our clients, and we know those of you joining us, you probably are in the midst of this. You either have a leader leaving, or you're leaving, or you have a new leader coming in, or you're transitioning some new people into your team. But everybody's in the midst of reshuffling and transitioning. And I think if we look at a silver lining, Micah, through COVID, it's kind of helped condense and boil things down to their essence of what's important.
Oh yeah. I think that's the source of what they called
Yeah,
the great resignation. People realizing, is this what I want to do with my life? And they go
yeah.
search something else. And I think that today's conversation is perfectly aligned with that, like reassessment of our priorities and values.
Exactly. And so one of the things we like to do as Clifton Strengths coaches is first start with your strengths. What are you made of? What were you made to do?
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with Clifton Strengths, you can go to either of our websites, and we can post those. You can also go to gallup.com and Clifton Strengths. But basically, it is an assessment that we've both used in corporate space to help individuals understand their unique value and come to work every day using that value. And there is a lot of engagement and a lot of science behind the Gallup Clifton Strengths tool. And so I've been working with it about 8 years. And one of the things I realized is that it's only so good if you take it out of the drawer and use it. So many people want to put it on the shelf after they've taken the assessment. I'm like, no, no, this
Nope.
is about working on
That's
your
the
strengths
problem.
daily, right? And part of that is understanding what your strengths are. But even deeper than that is understanding what your core values are. And so I'm going to pop here a slide, some slides. This is, we're getting fancy now. Got some
Yeah,
slides.
this is the first time we've introduced slides into one of our LinkedIn
So,
lives. So
woohoo!
big milestone, right? I've
So
got
we,
it. So Dana, can I make a quick
yeah.
comment? Just something you just said made me remember. I did a workshop for a team in Detroit in January of this year, and I worked with a leader that I've been in contact with, or actually that I reported to probably like 7 or 8 years ago, and we've stayed in contact since she left the company. And anyway, we did a workshop where it was a combination of the Clifton Strengths content and the book Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we focused on both. And part of what we've focused on was this line that Brene talks about in the book, that is, who we are is how we lead. And
Mm,
the way that we kind of delineated this was that talking about strengths and values is how you get to who you are. That is a precursor to really understanding how do you lead. And so I love that that's kind of, we're doing that again today, is talking about this really great combination of knowing ourselves and increasing our self-awareness, knowing ourselves deeply, can be accelerated by having a focus on your strengths and your values. And then how you show up as a leader is clearly aligned to both of those things. So I love that you brought that up too. It's like we're digging into that same topic again. Who we are is how we lead.
thank you for bringing that up. And I was looking at Brene Brown's latest book that came out this year, Atlas of the Heart. And she said that the number one thing coming out of COVID is to be connected to ourselves. And
Yeah.
so exactly what
This
you're
just
saying.
became a Brene Brown
Well,
love
yeah,
fest.
here, Brene,
I
we
love
love
it.
you. But it's so true. And I think being, vulnerable, that is exactly why we're here every couple of weeks, is to talk about what's going on in the in the workplace, and to give you tools and resources to help you as leaders and as coaches, so that you
Yeah.
can use these to move forward. And strengths are not developed alone, they're developed in relation to others.
Yeah.
So I
I love
love
it.
that you brought that up, is that who we are is how we lead. And so Micah, you would be surprised how many people I've talked to in my workshops and training that never stop to think about what their core values are.
Oh, I'm not surprised at all, actually.
But it's
It's
like,
pretty common.
what are those?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh. So I thought
Yeah.
we'd
So how do
start
you
with,
take them through the process?
yeah. So we kind of first to say, well, what are your core values? So they're one's judgment of what's important in your life. So they're always a part of us. They kind of highlight what we stand for, and they kind of represent that unique individual essence of who we are. They've just been with us. It's kind of like strengths. They've been with us our whole life.
Yeah.
Um, and so why do we think that we need to identify them? And I think right now, as we think about living in this amazing time that we're in right now, and you can hear Micah's positivity, I've got it midway, but it's like this is a greater time to really know ourselves. So, what are the reasons why it's important to identify them? So, you
Yeah.
can make a greater impact by honoring your values. It also guides your personal code of conduct. It's going to guide your decision making. It's going to help you connect with others and maintain good habits and avoid escaping bad habits. So, I actually talked about this morning in my email to my email subscribers, and I had one of my clients reach out and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm actually trying to decide between two positions right now, or two
Mhm.
opportunities. And I really am trying to really understand my core values and my strengths together, and how they're working together for this." And what was helpful is that he has high responsibility in his strengths. So he's very dependable. So he didn't want to let his current employer down.
Yeah.
Right. But yet, at the expense of staying where he is to be staying there just because he's dependable, versus
Oh my gosh.
using
I,
his
I
strengths to go
have
where he
I have one of these right now.
Do
One
you
of my
really?
clients is in the same boat.
Yeah. So what do you tell? I mean, so I listened to him and I said, "Do you hear what's happening here? You are
Yeah.
letting your strength get in the way of what's really, or your
Yeah.
core value get in the way of what you really want to have
I
happen."
think what's hard about this situation, I'm thinking of two different clients, and they're very different situations. One of which is where you are describing, where it's like his responsibility is keeping him at a company that's not good. He knows isn't long term, but
Mhm.
he started that job relatively recently and feels a commitment to follow through. Well, what's long enough for me to feel like I followed through on my commitment to this company before I can actually pursue what's most important to me? And it's interesting that what I've noticed in two of these clients that are struggling with the decision is that there is a conflict of strengths and values. And that's
Mhm.
where I think it can be really hard to make decisions when you feel like, well, my responsibility strength is making me feel like I need to stay, or I have this value of like you said, with responsibility, people with high responsibility tend to feel like when they've made a commitment to somebody, it's a matter of integrity to follow through. And if their
Mhm.
values are integrity, encouraging them to leave a job that they've committed to can feel like it goes against their values. And being able to dig into that and explore that is really helpful for decision making. You're number three there.
Yeah. And it was neat because when we dug further, one of his other core values was trust. And
Ah,
I said, "Well, what do you think that you have brought to the table all these years to this client?" He said, "Well, they trust me." Okay, well, so why don't we use that to talk about your core value of trust, to talk about how you're going to take this next step, and that
yeah,
you're not going to leave them in a lurch, and you're,
love it. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
So
beautiful.
it was an interesting, but as he said, and I told him I agree, we cannot develop we sometimes we talk to ourselves and that's why coaching is so important. That's why I've got a coach, I'm sure you've got a coach. We
Hmm.
all need somebody that we can call and say, "This is what I'm thinking. What are you hearing me say?"
Yeah,
And be able to
absolutely.
talk about his strengths and his core values at the same time. And we
What's interesting, oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, anybody that wants to pop in a question or a thought, please do. Micah's gonna be watching that.
Yeah, I keep in mind. Oh, there's Phil right on cue. Look
Yeah.
at that. Matching val Okay, so Phil's comment was, would like to hear tips for matching values with potential corporate values, given
Ah,
each side tends to be on their best behavior, citing values and living them, how to get laser clarity. So Phil, it sounds like you're almost saying, if I'm looking for a job, if I'm looking for a transition, or I'm interviewing a potential company and they're interviewing me, we can be on our best behavior and talk about what we value, and we're all going to say the right things, or say what the other person thinks that you want to hear, or you'll say what you think they want to hear. And sometimes that's not actually aligned. So matching our values personally with a company that we work for. So I think we'll dig into this in where I was going to ask you, Dana. My very question was, some people have. Oh, good. Lori's feeling that too. Lori just made a comment that that's spot on for what I've been struggling with recently. So
mhm.
here's what I noticed, and Dana, you alluded to this at the beginning. A lot of the people that I first start talking with, as soon as I bring up values, a lot of times they're like, okay, I mean, faith and family come up quickly. People
Mhm.
are often saying, yes, my faith and my family are my big values, and that's where they stop. And I'm
Oh,
like, well,
yeah.
what else? What else is important to you?
Yeah.
What drives decision making? What are you willing to? And this is the distinguisher that I use, is what do you spend your time, money, and energy on?
Mhm.
Those are your values, whether you've defined them or not. Those are the things that are truly what you value. And sometimes there's actually a mismatch between what people say they value and what they put their time, energy, and money into. And that's worth exploring too. But what you said before was like, what are my values? And I know
Yeah,
you have a
most people
slide.
don't
You have a
know.
slide for that. But
Yeah.
how do you help
Yeah,
people explore their
this
values
is
they don't
just a
know?
quick I just threw this up. You can go on the internet and find all kinds of
Yeah.
lists, but if you're with us right now live, or if you're watching the recorded version of this, I would encourage you to go out and research all the different core values lists out there. There's several you can find. I'm just
Mhm.
popping this up as an example, and just circle. I would not have more than 5. And you can't 3 to 5 is good. I would
I do
not
the
do more
same
than
thing.
5.
I say the
It's
same
just
thing.
like
Yeah.
a company, list of values you can't remember after you start, "Well, this fun and bold,"
Yeah.
and, and I think when you look at the list right now, those of you with us, just circle, or write down 3 to 5 that are important to you. And I know, as you mentioned, Micah, I think within your family, your faith, your work, your energy, where does all that come from? And what's
Yeah.
important, because this is what's the grounding of your decisions when you're making decisions to leave or to stay or to move, or like you're recently doing. There were probably some core values in your decision, that you're making recently with your family.
Yeah.
And we're one person. It's not like this, here's my personal life and then here's my work life. It's like here's Dana and here's what she needs. And these are her 5 core values no matter
Yeah.
what. So I can share some of mine are like trust, respect, generosity, faith. And I'm also big on community and
Cool.
transparency. Those are mine. What about you, Mike? Are there some
Yeah.
top 5 that you have?
Yes. So faith and family are definitely in my top as well. But I would say my next strongest value is gratitude.
Mm, love that.
I live with gratitude. I find it in everything, and it's so much a value of mine that I notice it when it's lacking in my children and other people, because that's so important to me.
Hmm.
Creativity is another one for
Hmm.
me. I need to be able to create, and it's so much a part of how I make decisions. Is, will this allow me to create something meaningful? And then generosity, like you said, is my fifth. So, can I
Love that.
share a couple of tips for people who are
Yes.
looking at this kind of exercise for the first time? A couple of things that I would encourage you to do, and I just Dana just mentioned this, but Brene Brown has a great values list,
Yes.
or it's called Values Inventory. Gallup, who we refer to a lot because of the Clifton Strengths work that we do, Gallup has a values inventory. It's like 2 pages of these. What I usually encourage people to do is go through twice. Go through the first time and just circle anything that you feel like might be in your top five. And it helps you narrow down the list so that you can go through a second time and really pick your top five. And as you're thinking about the top five that are truly your most important values, what's hard about this is that they all sound good. These are almost all of these are virtues in most people's eyes. So how do you choose one of these over the other? And what it comes down to is that if two of these values were at odds, which would you pick? And that's how I would help you go through your top. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you go through the first time and circle 10, but you're trying to narrow it down to five, which would you choose when they're at odds, when you can't have both? That's how you know it's really a value. And an example, let me see, I'm going to look at these real quick. Like honesty and peace, those are two that sometimes you can't have both. If you're going to be
Hmm.
honest with somebody, you're going to have to break the peace. Or if you're like really, if peace and harmony is really important to you, and sometimes that means it's at the expense of being honest so that I can maintain the harmony between us, you just identified your values. Harmony at the expense of honesty is more important to you, or honesty at the expense of peace and harmony, that means honesty is more important to you. So does that help? I don't know if that
That's a
anybody
great
who's
point.
listening, or yeah, when they're at odds and you have to choose one over the other, which one will make it to the top?
Yeah, because we want, and that's one of the things I do. I have the Strengths Journal, which is licensed by Gallup, and I actually have people write their mission and then their core values in there. And
Nice.
sometimes we really get focused on our core values first before we develop our mission. But
Hmm.
and I have everybody write it in pencil so that you can go back if you see another one, start to see that conflict. Oh, like you're right. Let's put in. Let's either have peace or we can't have both,
Right.
right? So I
And
appreciate that,
sometimes
Mike.
you can. I think a lot of times you can, but that's how I would say when push comes to shove, if they were at odds, which are you going to pick? So cool. Glad that
Absolutely.
helps.
Absolutely. So hopefully those of you watching right now have picked 5. We'd love to, if you want to pop them in on the chat, that would be
Yeah.
great. And share with us, that would be great.
Even just one of these, if one of them stuck out to you, that maybe you haven't considered before, that you didn't realize was a top value for you, but you're seeing it on this list, I'd love to see anybody pop those in.
Yeah, I loved how you talked about gratefulness. And I think, and I see that, I know that's your positivity coming out too, just
Yeah,
gratitude. Um, but there's something about this. This is all about energy when you're in your strengths, when you're using your core values. It's about managing your energy, not your time.
yeah,
And it gives you a lot of energy. So, how do you connect them to your strengths? And this is the big fun thing that I've loved to do with clients
yeah.
is write down, if you know your Clifton strengths, write down your top 5 and then connect them to your core values, and you'll do part of this connecting, and you'll see that values are the door to your strengths. And it's pretty exciting when you start seeing that. And like I have high belief, but I think that comes from my core value of transparency, and we say the truth, and so I connected those two. Um,
Nice.
How about you with ideation? I mean, you had mentioned creativity.
You
So what
you
do you
just hit it. That's exactly
yeah,
the one that I was
I think it
thinking
was your
is
ideation, yeah.
well, so it's odd. Ideation is not really high for me, but I do notice in people that I work with who have high ideation, when I say the word creativity, that always resonates with people with high ideation. Like the idea of creating something new, something from nothing, resonates so powerfully with people with high ideation. And I've noticed. I've never asked you this, Dana, because you have high ideation,
I
right?
do. I do.
Yeah. Have you like for a lot of people who have high ideation, the creativity I think resonates because so many of them have some kind of artistic talent. They play instruments, they
Mhm.
paint, they do art of some sort, they sing. Like there's some artistic talent that's so often aligned with ideation that I've only noticed that in the last 3 or 4 months and hadn't really
Yeah.
noticed it before then. So I'm curious, what's your artistic talent?
So innovation is where I use my
Ah,
creative my ideation is I whether in corporate it was okay, we got to get this product out the door. How are we going to do that? How are we going to innovate getting
yeah,
that out? So it's taking an idea and bringing it to life
cool.
is what I see. I'm not like an artist or a singer. Any I don't have that
No
gift.
physical
I
physical
have
art
a
talents.
maximizer in me that wants to make everything perfect.
Yeah,
Um, but but I like to take a thought and bring it to life
yeah,
and make it happen. So
yeah,
that's how it shows
cool.
up for me. That's a great question though. So thank you. So if you do have your top strengths and now you've got your core values, why don't you see if you can match them up? And I think one of the things that I think we had this question earlier is what's the difference between your personal core values and your company's?
Mhm,
And your personal core values define who you are, and a company's core values ultimately define the company's character and brand. So, individuals' character is destiny for organizations, culture is destiny. So, back to my example this morning of the gentleman that I was coaching, when we got down to how he was going to communicate this opportunity to his new to his leader, he tied it into his mission of his company
mhm.
about what he brought and how he could change things and move because he was going to be moving and wanted to make a difference. So um, that's how I said they're not going to listen to what's important to you as much as they're going to listen to how it ties back to the company.
That's right.
And so that
I
that's
think
kind of
that kinda goes to Phil's question before too.
yeah.
Like
When
how
Phil,
do we
yeah,
make that alignment better? And I think this slide is a really great, kind of intro to that topic, and I would just add, when I'm working with people who are looking for their next role, that they especially when they know it's at another company, and they're trying to feel that compatibility with their company or the company that they're pursuing and its culture, I don't I don't pretend to know whether your strengths and values are going to be a good match for a company that you're pursuing or that you're considering. But what I do encourage people to do as they prepare for the interviews is to remind themselves what are their top values, their core values, and their primary strengths, their dominant strengths, and use that knowledge in the interview process so that the interview isn't just about the employer interviewing you. It's your opportunity to ask them. And an example of this is if you know that you have, like, people with high strategic tend to like to find their own way of doing things. They don't want to do things the same way they've always been done just because they've always been done. They want it, or because they've always been done it that way. They want to have, they want to find their way. They want to
right.
find a new path to do it. And I think you pair that with ideation, and it's people that want to be innovative. They want to try something
Mhm.
new. And if you know that about yourself and you have a value around innovation or creativity, when you go into an interview, that's something that can become a discussion now because you know yourself so deeply. You could say, how would this be received? How would my strengths and values be received in an organization like yours? And try to dig on them to have an honest conversation. Would it be welcome if I try to do things in a different way, or would that be disincentivized? Because it's in our best interest together to identify whether that's true now before an offer is extended to me, because this is how I work. I work in a way that I look for a new way of doing things. I don't like the status quo. I want to push limits, push boundaries, and try something different. And if they're like, oh no, that doesn't work in our organization, like we have compliance standards that we have to keep. We can't innovate on some of these standards. This role wouldn't be a good fit for you. You just had a conversation, an honest conversation with someone, because you came prepared knowing your strengths and your values. So Phil, I don't know if that helps, but that was where my mind went.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I think so many times right now, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, people are making transitions right now and they're not thinking through things like this.
Yeah.
They're looking at the money or, oh, I
Yeah.
get to be, you know, hybrid or I get to live where I want to
Yeah.
live. And then they're getting there and they're going, uh-oh, I this isn't this company doesn't align with my
Oops.
core values. What
Yeah.
have I done? And a lot of times it's having those conversations right now with your current leader. As I talked with this gentleman this morning, before you make this move, see, let's talk about what opportunities are there right now for something to be designed. Here comes my innovation, but something to be you can design for you right now where you are instead of making the big move. Now, if there's other reasons why you need to leave, but you feel compelled to stay because you like the brand, that's one thing. But
Mhm.
if the brand is not something you're passionate about or the company's not, then it is time to move on. But
Yeah.
it helps kind of just put that litmus test and that filter for you as
Yeah.
you're going through these changes.
And I think for most people, it's really logical. Like, of course I would consider those things, but it's not intuitive. It's not the first thing we think about. We think about compensation, like remote work versus being in office right now, at least. And this is just another way to look at that job search process that gives you a little bit more to work with, that'll make you feel really good about a good fit, but also throw some red flags if it's not a good fit.
And to help you to continue to have those conversations with your leader. In this situation, if you have a leader that's not meeting and doing those regular one of the five conversations of which Gallup talks about, the five conversations that you want to have as a leader, if you're not having an ongoing conversation with direct reports, if you're not having an ongoing conversation with your leader, then you might have to create that opportunity
Yeah.
and not just wait for them to reach out because that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and sometimes it's interesting you say that. It just clicked for me that sometimes the core values that are modeled by the company aren't modeled by the manager you're under. And
right,
so it's not always necessary for you to go find another company. You might
right.
just find a better fit for your strengths and values within the company you're in. I would explore that first if you're at a large
Absolutely.
enough organization where you have options.
Absolutely. It's so much easier to stay and just fix what you need rather than keep jumping around. And that's not going to be seen as good too. So I would
Oh, that's
say for
funny,
your
Dana.
homework.
Dana, sorry to
Oh,
interrupt. Phil just made a comment. In my opinion, companies need all these values. So it might be appropriate for some to find their best fit at a company where their value does not yet exist. So, like diversity and inclusion angle. That I think that's a great example of what we were just talking about. Like, they're
yeah.
finding the right fit. Somebody needs your values and your strengths either within the same company or at a different company. It's just finding where it's most welcome and where it's best for both of you.
Yeah. So this is just an example of homework that I give my team when we're doing these workshops. But I would love for you to share either in this group if you were able to find a match. So I said like I use innovation and ideation, transparency and belief, accountability, responsibility, excellence and maximizer, inclusiveness and individualization. So it's important to know your top core values, match them to a strength, and then rank them in the order of importance. So
Yeah.
would love to hear that from you guys today. If you have if you could share, and we'd love for you to even take this home as a homework to do, and come back
Yeah.
and report back to Micah and I if you have any feedback on that. So
Well, we've got somebody, it says LinkedIn user, so we don't have a name, but somebody put, when we were asking about some of the values on that sheet that you showed, or on that
yeah,
slide that you showed, this user put curiosity. And immediately my thought was, I would be willing to bet money on the fact that that person has high learner, like that high learner or input.
yeah,
So that is one example of, if this person hasn't taken the Clifton strengths yet. If they have and they know their strengths, I would love to hear if learner is in your top strengths. But even if not, that's a great example of how sometimes we can have insight into our values by starting with our strengths and realizing, oh, I value curiosity, and that shows up in my learner strength. And there's definitely a connection between the two, and it's fun to explore that with people.
Yeah, I think of curiosity too, with my ideation. I have learner kind of up
Ah,
there, so I'm
yeah,
I'm always curious. But it could be if it's my individualization, if I'm curious about people. It could be my ideation if I'm curious about, okay, what's the latest trend going on right now in the marketplace? You
yeah.
know,
Oh, I
Elon
love
Musk
that.
just announced, back to the office. Well, what does that mean? Well, there's my
Yep.
futuristic. That's a little bit of curious.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
cool.
kind
I
of
love that.
interesting to see how curiosity can weave in
To different
several different
strengths.
talents, but definitely a
Yeah.
learner. I
Well, and
think
they
you're right.
actually confirmed. They said correct learner. So
Awesome.
yeah, it
Yay.
looks like that was
Awesome.
good.
Well,
Very fun.
great. Well, this has been great, Micah. Thanks for guiding
Yeah,
us
I love
today.
this topic.
Yeah, it's wonderful. If you guys have any questions, I'd like, I don't know, Micah, if you want to wrap us up and then we just can tell you how to reach us if y'all have questions or want to connect.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go. I think that there are some you can probably tell that we just scratched the surface of this
Oh, yeah.
topic, but we try to keep these to 30 minutes. Dana and I love taking people through these exercises. So if it's something you want to learn more about, we're both very active on LinkedIn, or you can go to our respective websites, which are also on our LinkedIn profiles. But just send us a message too if you want access to any of the resources that we shared today, or values inventory lists that we can provide. We would love to keep this conversation going with anybody who is interested. At the same time, if there are any topics that you would love for us to
Mhm.
address in a future LinkedIn Live on the topic of leadership or professional development, we would love to do that too. We like hearing insight from people about ideas that they have of what we could cover in the future. So please reach out if you have any thoughts or
Yes.
questions about any of that.
And we want to thank you. I want to thank Micah for leading us today, and thank you, Phil, and the other folks out there that we don't have your names, but thank you for joining us today. And we
Yeah, this
will
was
we will
fun.
post in our LinkedIn some of these other resources. So stay tuned, and we should be back in about 2 weeks.
All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
y'all.
All
Have a good
right.
one.
Thank you. Have a good one.